what we're missing is, how do we transform that heart? How do I help that bully actually change how they do things as a coach? I don't want to stop something. I want to change a heart. Because if you've got what's a bully? A bully is a villain. If you got the power to be a villain, you got the power to be a hero.
I want to welcome Mitch Hull today from the 3D Institute. Mitch has quite a resume. I won't read it all to you, but he was a two-sport Division I athlete, All-American wrestler, got second in the Olympic trials, had been a Division I coach, national team director for USA Wrestling. Guys really done it all now, working for the 3D Institute. So, Mitch, thanks for joining us.
Well, I appreciate giving me the time, and I look forward to the conversation.
Well, I gave everybody a brief glimpse at your resume. I'm interested to hear you talk more about your coaching journey and what led you to want to coach from through a 3D lens, from a 3D perspective.
Yeah, and basically, I fell into coaching is what it was. I was wrestling at the University of Wisconsin, finished my career in 1980, planned on continuing to wrestle through at least the 84 Olympic trials or Olympics, and so finished that, became a graduate assistant, and then was able to step into it as an assistant coach during the time I was still training. And it's something that I loved doing, and I just continued on through 1992 when I was the head coach at Purdue University and got the opportunity to step towards USA Wrestling and the position of national teams director, which easiest way to explain that is basically I was an athletic director for an Olympic sport. I oversaw the training and the coaching and the funding and things like that for our national teams. And I guess the issue would be is I would say I always would consider myself a three-dimensional coach. I had good coaches. I had I had great parents that supported what I was doing. And I always felt it was bigger than just the winning. And I think my Christian faith had a lot to do with that because it would help with my perspective. The difference was I wished I had the structure of it that I understand now. Because if I could have put it into words better, if I could have been more intentional about understanding, because I made my mistakes along the way. But being bigger than the wins and losses has always been a part of the way I believe about coaching.
Tell me more, because I think back to my coaching career too, and my heart was in the right place. And really, I spent a lot of years trying to really define my purpose. I heard you talk about faith a little bit there. I'm curious to hear, number one, how your faith informed your coaching, and did your purpose evolve over time?
Well, the answer to the purpose probably did evolve because that's the difference with what the 3D coaching, what I do now is you build off of that and you identify it and you clearly do it. Like you say, I always believed it was bigger than, but I didn't necessarily have a clear purpose. And the thing is, like all of us as coaches, we remember our failures way more than we remember our successes. And what always comes back to me is the second to the last year I coached at Purdue University, we finished 7th in the nation. That's the best Purdue's finished in wrestling in almost 75 years. And whenever anybody brings that up, I look at it as a failure. The best athlete we had on that team in December, he beat that year's national champion. And then he walked away. Didn't even have it. And we finished 7th. And the last conversation I had with him, it was, and I'll use a different name. I won't use his name. I said, Jeff, you've got an alcohol problem. That's the last conversation I had. I realize now, and better, is that Jeff didn't have an alcohol problem. He had a self-esteem problem that would manifest itself here. And he was a big, strong guy, but he would say some things that were, I guess everybody understand if I said meatheadish type things. And so it was lighthearted teasing from the guys on the team. But if you're on the receiving end of that all the time, that's death by 1,000 paper cuts. It's still death is what it is. And I didn't recognize it well enough to put him in a leadership role and make a difference that way. I understand it now. And so whenever this comes up, I look at the failure there of how I failed him, but it failed the team too. It doesn't matter that what we didn't place where we could have been. And so that always comes back to me. And I just didn't have the skills. I was in my early 30s. I didn't understand the skills necessary that I do now. And so this is the kind of things you think about when you go back. When you look at this, it's always the failures. And my idea is I need to help people now so that they don't make that same failure. That's what I love about what I'm doing. And it all does. It ties into my faith. But I talk about three-dimensional coaching, and I tie this in. We're all in three-dimensional coaching. Is basically this, as you well understand. We're physical, we're psychological, and we're spiritual beings. All of that. Now, when I say spiritual, I'm not talking about any kind of faith. It's the heart. And the easiest way to explain it, you and I sit here, and so does everybody else that may listen to this podcast. We all know that it is wrong to cheat on the test. The mind knows that. It's the heart that will determine whether I'll still do that or not. So we are spiritual by nature. And I know that where I failed in that area was not the skill set or the mindset. I missed the heart set with that individual and how I could have impacted that.
Dive into that a little more for me. In your role now, I mean, you have really a 30,000-foot view of what coaches, athletic directors are struggling with, the common mistakes. When you're dealing with the hard issues, what are the common mistakes you see coaches making, and what advice do you give them?
I'm seeing a lot of things, and I see well-intended people. And the way I look at this, because our structure is designed, our structure in this country is designed for coaches to fail. We put these people in the most influential positions that they'll ever have, and we expect them to be able to do these things, and we provide them no training. We don't require anything coming in, and what's worse is we're not helping them. And so what we have is, I think we have very few bad coaches. We have an awful lot of undertrained ones. What do I do when I've got a bully on the team? How do I help kids make good decisions, not follow rules? How do I help them make good decisions and grow? And the issue I've seen, I bet you multiple times this week, I've heard about it, is, season starting up again here in the fall. And in some of these teams, they got, in girls teams more than boys, because you got to build team cohesion or you're in trouble. And so there's a bully. Well, what do we do with that? Well, we have a meeting at the beginning of the year and tell people there's no bullying on this team. Well, if there's any bullying, you're done. What we're trying to do is modify behavior. And that's important. And that's what I see coaches do. They don't know how to do anything, so we're not going to allow you to bully. So they don't do it on the team, but they'll do it to somebody in the school. And so we do this, we stop the behavior in a specific spot, and that may be needed, but what we're missing is, how do we transform that heart? How do I help that bully actually change how they do things as a coach? I don't want to stop something. I want to change a heart. Because if you've got what's a bully? A bully is a villain. If you got the power to be a villain, you got the power to be a hero. And basically, to me, a villain is a hero without a guide. So how do we help coaches be guides so that we can take that person and say, why don't you come over here this week? These two girls need somebody. When they do something good, I want you to be the first person to give them a high five. And when they do that, you then go over and say, great job. I'm proud of you. Now they're starting to see how they can use the power that they have for good. But they don't know how to do that. That's where the guide comes in. So my role is to help coaches be intentional about being guides. Because if you want to create more heroes, you invest in your guides. And there's where this is what I see my important role is to help coaches be intentional about being guides.
I think the other thing you just said really well is I think young coaches especially are surprised how messy it is. It's messy and you lean into it, and it's the easy out is just saying, I'm going to kick that bully off the team. And the hard, important work is how do you walk with all those parties involved?
Yeah. And it's a great is that because later in life, those people, they grow up and they understand things, and they'll look back. And many times you've seen people apologize for being a bully, but nobody taught them. It's like this. I love simplicity. And Donald Miller, who wrote Blue Life Jazz, and he's a great business communicator, and his business is called Story Brand. And he says everything can be told in story format. Everything. And he's right. And in every story, there are four main characters. There's a villain, a victim, a hero, and a guide. And Hollywood's figured this out. You don't have Daniel without Mr. Miyagi in The Karate Kid. You don't have Luke Skywalker without Yoda. And so how do we help coaches be guides, to be intentional about, because I just say basically, and I did this with an athlete group. I go, athletes, you play two main roles in life. You play two, and what are they? It's amazing. They got the first one right away. Hero. And then I said, okay, what's the other one? And there was extended silence. Because as they sat there, who wants to say villain? But if you have the power to be a hero, it's the same power to be a villain. It's the same power. And a villain is just a hero without a guide. It's like I said, so what we need to do is help these kids. Don't just condemn them for being bullies and kick them out. You haven't solved anything. You just made them mad. Help them to show how to use that power for good. Because the one thing we do know, and if I saw you do something, we were out for a walk and there was an elderly lady that needed some help across the street, and you helped her across the street. I feel good too. That's the great thing about when you do things like that. The oxytocin is released for everybody, not only the person doing it, but everybody else around. And when you feel good and you get recognized for it, you'll want to do it again. So how do we be intentional about those things? That's what I spend time with is right now, my focus with schools is building operating systems to lead culture. And there's three things that you have to do, whether you use us or not. You have to have a process to onboard your coaches. You have to have a process to systematically celebrate the actions and activities that exemplify the values that you want for your culture. And then you have to have an evaluation system. So how do you onboard your coaches? The big part is how do you celebrate? So when that athlete does a good job, what do you do to intentionally celebrate it? And I help them build. That's my thing is we sit down tonight. I'm going to talk about the same thing later with a school. What are you going to do to intentionally celebrate when you see the things that exemplify your culture?
So much good stuff there. I'm going to bounce around. I've been taking notes. I think it's interesting. We've talked before we got on here, and now you're talking about like how to help that bully, right? Raise up a little bit. I'm like, okay, we got a messy situation here. I think most coaches want to be a guide, but often without a plan, some training and perspective, the first time that athlete go against their guidance, they take it very personally and almost like, screw it, I'm out. I can't help this kid. What's your advice to that young coach?
You haven't got through to them yet. You got to add, it isn't that you can't help them. You haven't been able to do it yet. because if you put yet into it, you won't give up. And and by the way, it may be the point where you do kick them off. I mean, that might be what needs to be done.
I'm in there, and sorry to interrupt you. We've been all in for the last year-ish with 3D, and we've had few coaches interpret it early on of, I can't kick all kids off the team, and I can't coach them hard. And I see it as the opposite. You coach them hard, you coach them more directly, and with the plan and the love behind it, it frees everybody up. And being soft is letting kids run away with behavior just because you're afraid that you're doing something wrong. Sorry.
I care for you too much to let you get away with that. That's the way you've got to look at it. If it's the wrong thing to do, you can't let them get away with it. And because I'm not helping them. And I know, a lot of this, as you just said, it's messy. It's easy for me to say these things. I'm not there, but it's right. So how do we figure this out? But it's the first thing you do is if they understand, even the person like this, what's important to do is I want to find out, why are they like this? They got alcoholic parents? Are they getting bullied or beat up at home? If you can understand who they are, then I can build the relationship, because without the relationship, and you're kind of right there, if without a relationship, why would they even listen to me? And so first and foremost is about building relationships. That's that definition of a coach. And I'm sure you've heard this, it's from the 1500s. It's the best definition that there is a coach is a covered carriage that takes a person of importance from where they are to where they want or need to go. Your covered carriage is safety, protection. Are they comfortable? You take what? A person of importance. There's no variation there. They're not more important if they can help me win, or less important if they're not very talented, or less important if they're a bully. They're all important. Doesn't mean you can't have favorites, but they're all important. You take them from where they are. That's the key. Do you know where they are? And then where are you taking them? That's the purpose of your purpose statement. And so if this is how you divide this down, what am I missing with this kid? I may not know where they are. A great example of this was, I was talking to an athletic director who's also the sophomore principal. And he had a teacher talking to him because they brought this kid in. Kid was sleeping in his class, wasn't paying attention and stuff. And so turned him in. And then, so they had a discussion, is that basically it came down to this, is, so you want motivated students, don't you? Yeah. So he goes, what are you doing to motivate them? That's a coach. So, I wish we got to get rid of the word teacher. What they are is classroom coaches. That's what you are. And he said, would you think of this differently if you knew we have a lot of kids that work third shift in this community because their families need the money? If he was falling asleep in your class because he's working third shift, would you think about this differently? And that's what hit the teacher. Yeah, I would give that person a lot more margin. I'd be helping them instead of condemning them. But he didn't know where he was. So that is essential. That will change. If you have a bully on the team and you find out the reason they're that way is because they're getting abused at home, are you going to look at them differently? I guarantee you would.
I think the foundation of that relationship is imperative. And the idealistic side of all this, we want to jump right into transformational coaching. And I can think of myself and many others where it's, gosh, we read Joe Ehrmann's book and we're just ready to go and miss the pace of relationships. And we don't like this word, but the foundation, in my opinion, of a lot of this is transactional coaching, meaning I'm going to do what I say and you're going to do what you say. And we build a relationship over time that allows us to get to know each other and really understand each other and build into the bigger stuff.
Yeah. So the point is okay, how am I going to be intentional about building that relationship? Mm-hmm. And if you see the line under my signature, it's my purpose with this. The whole thing is it's built around this, building a culture in sport that students want to be a part of that'll impact their lives is not easy or difficult. It's intentional. That means we all can do it. So how do I intentionally, I give this, football's the easiest one. I always talk to coaches. I go, how far is your football field from your locker room? And let's just say it's 100 yards. Okay. So here's one of the things we can do that won't add any time to what we're doing. After practice, each coach walks back to the locker room with an athlete. And the rule is you can't talk football. Find out about their family. Ask them the questions. Get to know them individually. Because that's how we find things out. And part of the question is maybe, hey, you know, I see one of your best friends is struggling right now. Can you help me that? What's happening? And now they can be part of the solution. And when you give people the ability to be part of the solution, you're going to get buy-in a lot quicker.
Yeah, it's certainly, well said. It's intentional. It's not really brain surgery. It's taking the time.
None of this is. If it was, you got the wrong guy in my position. I see. In fact, my title here is the Director of Professional Development. The only reason that's my title is I gave it to myself. But I actually have adjusted it. My title is I'm collector of the tools, because I get to talk to coaches all the time about what's working. What are they doing? And I collect them. And then I steal this stuff all the time from people. That's maybe it's stealing of the tools could be a better point, because none of my stuff's original, except for my definition of originality. And that is, originality is simply one's ability to keep your source a secret.
In our higher ed world, we would call that plagiarism.
Well, I'm very good at it.
Let me ask you this. Your resume, you've coached the best of the best, most talented wrestlers in the country, in the world, competed at that level. In your role now, I'm curious the differences and similarities from, say, coaching a high school athletes to coaching a Olympian. Talk us through the differences and similarities there.
The difference is, in most cases, if you're talking at the Olympic level, that person's motivated. Mm-hmm. Right. John Kessel was one of the great volleyball development coaches out there. He put it this way: he says, I don't coach for the 1%. I coach for the 99, because the 1% doesn't need me. They'll get there with anybody. Now, you'll still want to be able to help them, but they're motivated. Most of the problems are the same, except when you're a high school coach, how do you coach, for lack of better words, the glue kids? The ones that they're not that motivated. They're there because they like the sport and they like being with their friends. Playing college isn't in there. They'll be done when they're done with high school, and that's kind of the effort they're going to put in. That's the biggest difference up there. The other problem that's with the higher you get, the bigger the issue is with regard to identity, because you get to that. I'll just stay with wrestling. I'm trying to make the Olympic team. I'm on the world team. That's who I am. Wrestling is who I am, not what I do. That is a big problem, because then you look at yourself as a failure when things don't happen the way you're doing. And even if they do, even if everything works out right, because it's so much of who you are. When I was involved with the Olympics, we dealt with, post-Olympic depression is a real thing, because when your whole focus is on one thing, and even if you become the Olympic champion, the day after it, what do I do? Because this is what I've done my whole life. It's an identity, and you get, even if it's so hard, and it is hard, it's still what I am. And so we have to help in that world more so. In the individual sports, it becomes, a sports-based identity. Not as big an issue in the team sports, but team sports have their own issues. So on the high end, these people are focused. on the lower end, they don't know yet. I heard a person, a doctor, the other day in sports psychology, talk about the honor and the struggle, and high level athletes grasp it, understand there's true honor in this struggle to get there. Younger people don't even know what struggle is, and we have to help them see the value in it. So there's that whole range in there, but the reality in the end, it's still about building relationships.
Do you think so that high level kid, we deal with this at our level too, where the idea is I'm a wrestler, I'm a basketball player. If they're able to grasp their identities beyond that, when that light bulb comes on, do you think it helps them perform in their sport or hurts their performance in their sport?
It's kind of like saying, does anger and intensity help people in their sport? And yes, it does. I mean, if you got a guy who just is angry and nasty and all that, but over time, it wears you out. To have to be angry and mad and dislike people to tear their head off, and can it do something for performance in a short term? It can, but it's not in the long run. This is kind of an aha for me watching a 30-second video of Gary Vaynerchuk that I share now. And I can't use many of his videos because he gets pretty salty with his adjectives most of the time. But this 30 seconds was great. And it was a girl that was asking him, hey, you weren't always this confident. How'd you get to your confidence? Before she finished, he goes, my mom. And because what my mom did, he was brilliant. He said, when I was 9 years old and opened the door for an elderly woman at McDonald's, you'd have thought I won the Nobel Peace Prize. He said, my mom overreacted to things that were a good human trait, and she held me accountable for things that didn't matter, like grades. And I thought that's brilliant. And I've turned that to sport. So what doesn't matter? Winning. If we can learn, this is how we get there and help people succeed better. We don't hold them accountable to the result. We hold them accountable to the process. We're going to celebrate when they're a great teammate and have great attitude and all this. But let's say we don't win the game, and we sit down and we go in my sport. I'll just use wrestling. Okay. Did you use the techniques that we talked about? Were you in shape? Did you get your weight down the right way? Did you get enough rest? Did you get the right nutrition? And if the answer would be yes to all of those, then the result's the result. It's just what it is. But if we find out, man, I wasn't in good enough shape, so my technique wasn't working in the third period because I couldn't do it. Well, now it's the process. Okay, I don't care about the result. We're going to get you in better shape. So if we focus on the process, we take the pressure off the result. And we know this, if we can take the pressure off the result, we're going to have a better chance of getting there. Yeah, so that's who I think this was brilliant. And this is what I talk to schools and coaches now all the time. Let's tell them, and even with academics, did you study? Did you do your homework? Did you get extra help? Did you get enough sleep and rest and all this? If the answer is yes, then the grade's the grade. You did the best you could. But if I find out you didn't do your homework, well, gosh, maybe that's why we got that grade. So now we'll focus on the homework. So what we've done is we've taken and we've put it towards the process, and we didn't do anything. We didn't put the pressure on the result. And when he was going through this, I'm going, man, this is simple and brilliant. And we're going to celebrate the goodness stuff. Because when we do that, greatness is going to happen.
That triggered a story for me. Back in my coaching days, we had a really, really good year the year before and got the core group back the next year, and it was just struggling. especially self-imposed expectations can be very difficult. But after a game where our process was bad and the guys were tight and they weren't supporting each other, just a lot of things, I get up in front of them and I just picked a random year. I'm like, I bet you can't tell me, it was baseball, like who won where is it, junior college World Series in 2012. And just try to prove the point of relationships, that kind of thing and process. And I'll be darned, my young assistant didn't get it, didn't grasp it. To me, they said the school that won it. Oh, shut up, Zach. That's not helpful. But yeah, it's just, man, it can take the fun out of it when it's about the end result. And it also,
well, it not only can, it does. If it's about the result, because here's the problem. We talked about this in my high school. We had a coach talk about our goal is to be undefeated this season. Well, what happens when you have your first loss? Goal's gone. Instead of being that, I said, how do we make this work? He said, here's our goal, to be 1-0 this week. And when you get through, what if you lost? Well, then you start back and say, here's what happened. Here's where we need to do things. Because what's our goal this week? To be 1-0. So we can continue. And by the way, if I'm 1-0 9 times, I'm 9-0. I can get there at 1-0. But what happens is now I do not, with the goals gone, there's another step in the motivation. So that goal's gone. So what are we going to do? Our goal is going to be 8-1. We just want to keep lowering our goal. And then the goal doesn't really mean anything. And so if my goal as a coach is to help you perform better at the end of the year than you did at the beginning. That, and there's plenty of things that we could do, because here's the big thing. And if I was coaching today, the biggest sign, it might be the only sign in my wrestling room, it would be a huge one over on the biggest wall. And it would say this: failure is not an option. It's mandatory. Because underneath that, it says we are failing forward. Is I need to know. I don't want people afraid of failure, because if they are, then the only thing they're going to do is the thing they already know. I want them to embrace it, because it's going to help me succeed later. I need to know what you're failing in. Same thing if I was teaching math. Okay, where are we failing? Are we failing at the multiplication tables when we have numbers above 10? Good. All right. So now that's what we're going to work on. And when we succeed, I'm high-fiving him and then saying, okay, where are we going to fail next? I want them to look forward to failure, because failure is it's a different, what I'm doing. If they're afraid of failure, it's a fixed mindset. Mm-hmm. The difference between a growth mindset and a fixed mindset, because here's the difference. If you have a fixed mindset, what is failure? Condemnation. I can't do it. I failed. If I have a growth mindset, what is failure? Information. That changes everything.
Yeah. It's tricky because, I don't disagree with anything you just said. And it's really what helps a team win or an individual win. But you don't talk about it. But at the end of the day, I'm curious, how much do you think winning matters in all this?
How much? Well, I play the game to win.
Yep.
Right. I don't want to downplay this. My big thing is I just want team cohesion. Everybody get along and kumbaya. And who cares if we get our rear end handed to us? It's goes to this. This is what I would say. Here's my vision. I want to build a culture of excellence. What is excellence? Excellence is being good at the great and great at the good. Right? So if all we care about is winning, and I don't care about if you get along with your teammates and that, and we win the championship, that's success, but it's not excellence. And if the flip side, if we get along great and we're having a great time and high five and we lose almost all our games, all right, that's not excellence. It's both. You don't ignore one or the other, but we focus on goodness, and greatness will be a byproduct.
Yeah, this is a tough one for me because I absolutely believe winning matters. But as I said, I'm in my 8th or 9th year as an athletic director now. But I also see often the best learning experiences are through the valleys. And you don't want to lose. And I'm a little disappointed in myself how competitive I still feel watching our teams play. But the best growth happens often when you lose. And then how do you take on that failure? How do you grow? How do you work together as a team? And gosh, 10 years from down the road, that matters. I think that transferable skill, that learning, but it's a competing value for me. It's such a tension.
And it needs to be. And it will always be, because sport is emotional. This is one of the most emotional areas. And we allow behavior in sport in this, and this is the bad part. We allow behavior in sport that we would never accept anyplace else.
Yeah.
Because it's so emotional. But if it is, in the end, if it's not about growth, if it's only about winning, and by the way, I didn't win the NCAA title my junior or senior year, and I failed at that goal. But the issue is, almost every athlete, the last competition they have is a loss at any level. You're a volleyball team and you only played in high school. What's your last game? Unless you win the state championship, it ended in the regionals or sectionals with a loss. Right? At the end of your career, very few people's last competition is a win. Does that make us failures? No, we just failed at a goal, but that doesn't make it a failure, because the higher I go, even I've talked to if you ask Barry Davis, who was still the winningest wrestler at Iowa, 3 NCAA titles. He's got the most wins in the history of Iowa wrestling. He's got an Olympic silver medalist. He's a world silver medalist. If you ask him about his career, he's going to say the same thing of a kid who didn't win the state title, whose goal was to be a state champion. I failed at my goal. He wanted to be an Olympic champion or world champion. And to the point where, and I agree with him, I said, would you give up all your NCAA titles, all your medals and that for one world title? His answer is yes. Just to be the best one time. Does it make him a failure? No. No, not at all, because we're looking at the wrong thing. I asked the associate athletic director at the Naval Academy, who's a good friend of mine, Jay Antonelli, who's wrestled during my career, who didn't make the Olympic team. Neither did I when I took second. Here's how you judge this. I asked him this: if you had to do it all over again and you knew the result would be the same, would you do it? He immediately said, absolutely. And I said, my response is in a heartbeat, because it was the journey that made it great, not the destination. We have to look at it. And sure, did it hurt? It still hurts. I took second in the Olympic trials. You know what that got me? A handshake. That's what it gets you, right? Do I miss that? Is it a disappointment? Sure, it's a disappointment. The more you strive, the more you're going to be disappointed, because you keep setting things higher and higher. That doesn't mean the journey isn't worth it. This is what we have to, I tell you, this is why I'm involved, because I'm one of these people that didn't accomplish the goal they set, which puts me with most people, right? But I have no regrets. I put everything I had into it, and I didn't get there. I want other people to experience the value of the journey. That's why I do this, because I wouldn't hesitate to do it again, even knowing if the result was the same.
That's a good segue to the last topic I want to explore with you, talking about kind of coaching Generation Z, where you're talking about having the long view, and incredibly valuable. Probably, in my opinion, as difficult now as ever, when success looks easy when you look on social media. Curious your thoughts on, in quotes, this generation, but Generation Z, with all the social media, internet interconnectivity coming out of COVID and some isolation there. How do you think they've changed, and how do you think they've stayed the same in terms of how you coach them?
Well, I'd say by a quote that was said is talked about this generation doesn't respect authority. They challenge their teachers. They sit around and don't like activity and that. That was stated by Aristotle, I think it was 2000 BC. He could have said that yesterday.
Yep.
Okay. We're always complaining about the youth today. If the reality is, we should all be dead if it was based on the 60s hippie culture. Right? People grow and experiment. The difference today is, and this is what's scary, because if I was growing up today, I would be the same as the individuals, because they're getting information they shouldn't see too young. And there's things that are scaring them. There's things that they see and are growing up too fast before their brains can conceptualize things. Because of the greatest invention probably ever made is the cell phone. It's one of the greatest tools that there is with regard to information. But that baby sucks for communication. And that's how they do it. And so instead of comparing yourself to the kid down the street, you're comparing yourself to every kid in the world. And when you post social media, everybody's life looks good. And so the stress of being less than is something that they're dealing with that I didn't have to. And the other part is, if I screwed up back in my day in the 70s, you had to be there to see me screw up. Today, it's posted and it doesn't go away. There's a lot more mental stress that they're getting at an earlier age that their brains aren't prepared for. But I can tell you this, I don't think there's a more important time to coach than there is today.
Absolutely.
Because they need you. Tell me one other place that you know of that these kids, when they're 16 years old, will put their phone down for 2.5 hours outside of, if they went to a sport practice or an extracurricular, they were in the school play. When else will they put that thing down? No, what they have is they're on this phone and they have relationships that are a mile wide and an inch deep. And sport may be the only place where they've got to be a mile deep and an inch wide, because that's where we're communicating directly, and somebody's relying on me and I'm relying on them to make sure that we do something bigger than ourselves in a team concept. That's why we're so important, because if it isn't there, where are they building their relationships? And we need to be intentional about building those, because when we do, that's what's going to make a difference in these kids' lives, because now they know when they're struggling, they've got a teammate or they got a coach they can rely on to help them.
How do you think you build toughness with the modern athlete?
I think you do it the same way you should have done it with me, but you didn't have to, because I had more margin. I had a handful of wrestling matches before I got to high school. I just wanted, you could not be nice to, I just wanted to wrestle. Nowadays, if you got all of this and you don't build a relationship, kids will quit easier today because we've taken that margin away. We've been competing for too long. But to get toughness, right, you do it through relationships. And so you show them the benefit, and then they are together if they're doing it together with other people, and you don't get toughness by using it as a punishment. It's like, hey, if you're late, you're running laps. You don't get along, you're running laps. Let me say, if I was a track coach, I'd be mad at those coaches. They're making my sport into a punishment. You've got to help them with the benefit of it. And then the honor, again, the honor's in the struggle. Boy, when it's easy, nobody cares. When we can show them that they improve, and then we continue to support them. And I know I don't want to sound soft here, because it's not. In fact, it's hard. You see, you want to make them tougher recognize the effort, not the result.
That's providing, I'm stealing this from somewhere, but providing psychological safety within accountability.
Yep. That's why your covered carriage that takes a person of importance. Cover is protection and safety. Is this program safe? You don't point somebody out because they're the last in the run. Right? Because what we want to do is help them compare themselves to themselves. That's the only comparison that you should have. That way if I'm better today than I was yesterday, it doesn't matter how I compare to somebody else, because we're going to get there. Which is why it's not about the wins and losses. Then we're going to sit down, we're going to figure out why you lost. And it may be the guy was just plain better. Plow horses don't outrun stallions. I don't care how well you train a plow horse. But I'm not comparing myself to that stallion. Or I say you can be there. They got there because they're 2 years ahead of you with what we're doing. That's what you're going to look like. If you trust me, I'll get you there. So the whole thing is trust. Truly is. And then that's a relationship.
Well, I think that might bring this conversation full circle and a good place to wrap up. We always finish with a rapid fire round of questions. So you have no longer than 30 seconds to answer any of these questions. So you ready?
Okay. Yep.
What's one thing we haven't covered that we should have?
How do we get parents on board? Because we look at parents as the liabilities instead of assets. If you look at them as liabilities, that's what they'll be. But the reality is we've got their treasure, and we've got the same goals they have. So how do we get them on board? Because they are not the disease. If they're a problem, they're the symptom of a disease elsewhere.
Right on. What is the book or books you've given most as a gift, and why?
I'm not. I only read nonfiction, and I'm not a big reader. But the one I recommend the most by far is I'm a Malcolm Gladwell fan with outliers in that, but it's Carol Dweck's Mindset. Because I say it's the best athletic book that there is, even though she only spent 3 pages on sport, because it's about how you build a growth mindset.
Agreed. How has a failure set you up for later success?
Well, I think I go back to time. If you say the greatest failure I had, one was with coaching that one young man that is helped me with what I do today, because people relate to failures more than they do successes. And then the other one is not making the Olympic team. That was everything I was focused on, was making the Olympic team, and it didn't happen. But I can relate to everybody else who didn't accomplish their goals as well. And I use that as the point is I do it all over again if you focus on the journey.
Cool. What is your favorite podcast?
Man, I don't listen to podcasts very much. I don't have it on my phone. I listen to talk radio, but I try to not so much political, is knowledge based. So I'm looking all the time when I travel.
Well, we'll just say this one and move on to the next question. In less than 30 seconds, how would you define success in your work now?
Success in my work is helping coaches understand it's about significance. And it's hard to be significant and not be successful, but you can be successful and never be significant. So if we focus on significance, we've got a greater chance of being successful.
Well said. Last one. In the last 5 years, what new belief, behavior, or habit has most improved your life?
There might be almost two tied together. And is that I try to be intentional every morning when I get up, because I go work out about 5:30, but I'd be intentional about reading 2 chapters in the Bible every morning before I go work out to help me with my mindset.
That's a good one. Well, that's all I got for you today. There's a lot of gold in this conversation. I appreciate you sharing your wisdom with us.
Well, I'm not so sure how much wisdom was there, but it's certainly the experiences that I've had, and it's hard to have wisdom without age, but age doesn't guarantee it.
Absolutely. If anybody listening wanted to get in touch with you and ask some more questions, what's the best way for them to do that?
Go to our 3D Institute website, and our information is there. I got no problem. If anybody wanted to email me, it's mitch.hull, Hull, at 3dinstitute.com.
Cool. I'll make sure all that info's in the show notes too.
Well, cool. Hey man, I appreciate you reaching out, and I love the conversation, and what you're doing is significant.
Cool. Mitch, thanks so much. I hope this is the first of more conversations.
All right. Well, thank you.
Cool. Thank you very much. Thank you for listening to this episode of Beyond Coaching. We hope today's discussion provided you with insights into understanding and leading. As always, thank you to the 3D Institute and Friends University for their support and passion for empowering leaders. And if you have any questions for today's guest or myself, all our contact information is in the show notes. Thanks for tuning in.